Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming Dr. Agi.
As I asked me to talk about education in Africa, which is a huge topic, and of course everyone has the right to be educated. Point number one there in Article 26 of the UN Declaration of Human Rights. We want to even talk about point number two, about what education should consist of, and point number three, which has been problematic in some areas. But let's just say, all right, everybody has the right to an education. Learning to read and write is a fundamental right, and yet 38% of African adults, we're not even talking about children, are illiterate, and 2/3 of them are women. Luckily, the UN has created an agency and a program, Education for All. It's a global commitment to provide basic education for all. In Dakar, in 2000, an agreement was signed, and many countries pledged to reach 6 goals by 2015, and one of those goals is universal education. Recently, the Brookings Institute had a positive spin on this. Primary school enrollment in sub-Saharan Africa, we'll talk just about sub-Saharan Africa, increased from 59% to 77%, which looks very good. And that's partly because of these international agreements, excuse me, and accords. But there's a lot to be done. The population of sub-Saharan Africa is increasing at twice the world's rate of population increase. There'll be 1.5 billion people in sub-Saharan Africa by 2030. And so it's extremely difficult to provide the educational opportunities for so many. And there are 4 problems. One is in the area of school enrollment. How are we doing it, getting people enrolled, getting kids enrolled in school? Well, the Brookings Institute has reported that we're not going to reach that goal of universality by 2015. In fact, despite the increase in percentage of those educated, the number of children who are out of school is actually increasing. A second problem is, even if you're enrolled in school, what is the likelihood that you will complete school? And this is a bit of sad news too. If you're enrolled in primary education, the first few years of school in sub-Saharan Africa, only 1 out of 10 of those students will actually make it through what we would call 12th grade and onto university study. Even if you are in school and on track to graduate from with a secondary degree, the quality of education is poor. There are 17 million who will never go to school. There may be 13 million that will eventually go to school but arrive there later than one would expect, later than childhood. But 37 million of the 97 million kids in school will never learn basic skills like reading, writing, and numeracy, will never become literate from their school experience. Learning achievement is low. 28% of 6th graders in Tanzania, only 19% in Kenya, less than 10% in Uganda can read at grade level. Now, you would expect only 50% to read at grade level, if we're talking about averages. But this is to be able to read basic materials at a grade level. And then we come to the 4th concern, which is education inequality. And we all know that there are disadvantages that keep education from being equitable. So especially the poor, the rural, the female. And how are we going to be able to continue providing education for a larger number if we don't have skilled teachers? So some of those folks who get an education do need to become teachers. And then, of course, the millions of teachers who are already there in sub-Saharan Africa need training, more education, and need to train future teachers. Well, UNESCO wants to work on teacher training, recruitment, retention of teachers. There, as here, an educated person might find a more lucrative way to make a living. And also the status and working conditions of teachers are poor. One benefit and constraint is that the program is run by the countries themselves. And so certainly there are a number of countries that are involved in the program with varying levels of progress. And then when we consider even if kids are not well served at home, for lots of people, especially here in this country, even if you weren't paying much attention or were spending your entire time on a device in school, at least when you get home, your parents can tell you what the homework is supposed to be. That's not necessarily the case if the adults also are not literate. And the literacy rate is below 50% in a number of sub-Saharan countries. Very sadly, only 1% of the national education budget for sub-Saharan Africa, most African governments, goes toward literacy. And of course, literacy is necessary for just about anything. If you think of everything that you did today, what would you have been able to do today were you not able to read? Even being able to read the map didn't help me get here in short order. There are a number of skills we need. Literacy is primary. So what would it cost? According to UNICEF, it would cost, and this was back in '97, it would cost $1.9 billion to provide primary education for all children in Africa. All children in Africa. How much money is that? Only as much as it costs for kids in Western countries to have so many PlayStations. $1.9 billion. Okay, so how can we help? One would be to support those UN initiatives, so we get positive news. Another is to support certain US initiatives. One would be PEPFAR, maybe you've heard of that, the President's Emergency Plan for AIDS Relief, started 10 years ago by President George W. Bush. It started with, I think, a $1.5 billion estimate. Why focus on AIDS? Because 95% of the world's 13 million children, this is 11 years ago, were orphaned. Those orphans, 95% of them were Africa. And if one can solve the problem, if one can at least provide antiretrovirus vaccines to adults, it seems to have very positive effects for children's education and schooling. And also, kids have to work less. There are many other economic things that can be done to improve economies, but that also seems to be a positive effect. Oh, it won't go forward anymore. It's tired of this. We'll get to that. Okay, thank you very much. Okay. So how much money should the U.S. spend? There have been some debates about it, but at least President Obama has been asking for more money. It looks like maybe 3-4 times as much as originally. And we'll see what happens with the budget request. So some U.S. initiatives can be supported. A third option is maybe tell your educational story. And one possibility would be to let us, Wake Up For Your Rights International, interview you and put your educational story up on our Wake Up For Your Rights webpage. I've heard from a couple of people already what their experiences have been, and I think telling that story and explaining how one emerges from that a whole and wounded but capable person is, I think, a story that needs to be told and read by many. And finally, support private education and health initiatives like those of John Hayes, who was going to be speaking next. And not sure that he is, because I haven't seen him here. But there are some health initiatives like bringing fresh, clean drinking water without diseases to people, and even that can make a difference in terms of education. As far as I'm concerned, all of these perspectives, political, economic, and so on, all tie into developing an educational system for all of Africa, especially sub-Saharan Africa, to create free peoples.